Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we're going to go over all of the King's Fall weapons that have released this week, and going over all the possible roles and some of the roles I am personally looking for as we get more chances to get these weapons, and then potentially looking at crafting a little bit down the line once we get enough of the red boxes as well. I'm going to be looking at this from a PvE purely perspective, and for PvE I really only care about the last two perks, so I won't be talking too much, if at all, about the barrels or the mags, but these last two perk slots are going to be very important, and we're going to go over all of them. Also note that every single King's Fall weapon has the Runneth over Origin trait, which allows for reloading near allies to overflow the magazine, and this does stack based on how many allies are near you. I was using it yesterday a bit on a couple different weapons, and if you're next to all 5 allies in a raid, it gives you a serious solid chunk of a bigger magazine. Like, we're talking close to doubling your mag when you reload. Starting off with the Pulse Rifle, Smite of Merain, we have Ensemble, Moving Target, Pugilist, Demolitionist, Well-Rounded, Focus Fury, and Stats for All in the first column. Out of these perks, honestly, I'm looking mostly at Demolitionist. I do play a lot of Warlock, and Demolitionist is just a great perk for Warlocks especially. We already usually have a pretty low grenade cooldown and build around our grenades, so Demolitionist is great. You get even more grenades, you get to reload when you throw your grenades. Definitely still a useful perk on other classes as well, but especially on Warlock, I really love Demolitionist. I'd say out of these other perks, really the only other one I'm looking for PvE is Stats for All. This is going to give a lot of stats when you do hit 3 different targets. As you can see on the screen here, you will get range, stability, handling, and reload speed as long as you hit 3 enemies within 3 seconds of each other, and you do get those buffs for 10 seconds. So this is also a really nice perk if you're not really too worried about grenades or getting more grenades or throwing your grenades a lot. You can just kind of get some more base stats and total stats using Stats for All. In the final column, we have Eye of the Storm, Gutshot Straight, Swashbuckler, Adrenaline Junkie, Firefly, Vorpal Weapon, and One for All. This column has a lot more interesting perks in my opinion. I feel like Swashbuckler can work if you're going to be up in enemies' faces getting your melees. Even if you don't, it still does give you a damage buff just off of normal kills with the weapon. You've also got Adrenaline Junkie that works pretty much exactly the same way as Swashbuckler, but with grenades, and especially if you're pairing it with Demolitionist, this is a very nice roll, Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie. We've got Firefly, which is another great perk, very popular on Fatebringer, but now we've got that on a couple of the King's Fall weapons. This is going to allow for explosions and also giving you reload speed whenever you get precision kills. And then we've also still got Vorpal Weapon, which if you're going to be using this potentially on champions, maybe as a champion killer or stunner in stuff like GMs and stuff, very useful. And then we've got One for All as well, which I've gone for Stats for All and One for All on a couple different weapons that has that potential role. And this is just like stats everywhere when you go for Stats for All, One for All combination. You don't necessarily have to pair them together, but One for All is going to give you another potential damage buff if you're hitting multiple targets quickly. So again, like I said, there is 5 perks here in this last column that I could argue are pretty solid. For me personally, the role I am specifically looking for is going to be Demolitionist and Firefly. That's just me. I think Firefly is a really nice perk. I like the explosions. I like having the potential to have a little bit of AoE ad clear with my weapons whenever that's possible. And I really love Demolitionist. This is one of my favorite perks in the game. But again, I think there's a lot of possible combinations here. So go with what fits your playstyle. Next we've got the Doom of Chelchis Scout Rifle, and this is one of my favorite weapons in D1, and luckily enough for me, I've gotten like 76 of them in the first 2 resets of King's Fall being out. I'm hoping to be able to craft this one pretty quickly. In the third column, we've got Rangefinder, Steady Hands, Adaptive Munitions, Stats for All, Explosive Payload, Firefly, and Vorpal Weapon. So as you can see here, like one of the first things that steps out to me is the fact that Vorpal and Firefly are 3rd column perks instead of 4th column perks, which is kind of nutty, especially with some of the ways you can combo it with the 4th column, which we'll see in a second. Definitely interesting there. I always really love Explosive Payload, especially on Scout Rifles, and probably hand cannons too, stuff like Fatebringer, but this is tough. This is a very tough row. I think there's a lot of good perks. Again, I think the Stats for All is pretty solid as well here. I personally am going to most likely go for Explosive Payload, but again, Firefly too. Like, I think these two are definitely top for me personally, but it's a tough decision. We're going to have to kind of test some things. I think you can't really go wrong with Explosive Payload or Firefly. Again, I think there's some value in Vorpal Weapon and Stats for All as well, but again, kind of a your choice type of a thing. In the final column, we have Eye of the Storm, Unrelenting, Repulsor Brace, One for All, Frenzy, Focus Fury, and Dragonfly. So what's crazy here, as you can probably see, is you can get Firefly and Dragonfly on the same weapon. To me, this is a little bit of overkill. I think it's a really funny thing. I think it's a really powerful explosion thing. I don't necessarily think it's going to necessarily be the best role. I feel like you're kind of overlapping a bit rather than getting maybe a little bit more value somewhere else. But if you just like explosions, like pure explosions, this is a nutty combination. I think Frenzy is a very, very good perk here, especially being able to pair it with other things like Explosive Payload and Firefly. If you do something like Firefly Frenzy, you have two different ways to get your reload up, which I like having my reload pretty quick. Whether you're in combat, you get reload and damage. If you get precision kills, you're getting that reload and that explosive AoE damage. You could also go something like Explosive Payload and Frenzy to get a little bit just more pure damage with Explosive Payload, and then more damage with reload speed here. You could also go Stats for All with Frenzy. Like, there's a lot of combinations. You still got One for All. You go Stats for All, One for All again. I don't really think any of these top perks are anything I'm too interested in, but One for All, Frenzy, and Dragonfly, I can see it. Again, I'm a little bit down on Dragonfly. I'd rather just go Firefly and then pick either One for All or Frenzy in most cases. But I think for me, personally, I'm either going Explosive Payload and Frenzy, or I'm going Firefly and Frenzy for my perfect roll. Next, we got the Zalou's Bane Hand Cannon. The third column here has Ensemble, Hipfire Grip, Gutshot Straight, Pugilist, Opening Shot, Well-Rounded, and Explosive Payload. For PvE, this is a super easy decision for me. Explosive Payload is really the only perk that I personally feel like has really any value out of these seven perks that we got here. I think Explosive Payload is 100% the choice. I don't think anything else even is in the same neighborhood. Explosive Payload's a great perk as it is. Like I said before, I like it on Scout Rifles and Hand Cannons especially, and honestly the other 6 perks are all just not great in my opinion for PvE, so Explosive Payload is a pretty easy choice for me here. The fourth column has Surrounded, Eye of the Storm, Demolitionist, Focus Fury, Firefly, One for All, and Incandescent, which Incandescent's a great perk. Incandescent's an outstanding perk. There are some other great perks here. Explosive Payload Incandescent is... I want this. I want this a lot. I think that's going to be super neat. I think it's going to be super fun. I'm definitely excited to get an Explosive Payload Incandescent Zalou's Bane here. I think Firefly is also really good. Explosive Payload Firefly, it's literally Fatebringer, but now it's solar, so that could be pretty sweet. One thing with Explosive Payload and Firefly, it does sometimes mess up a little bit because Explosive Payload can get kills, which then makes it you not get the precision kill, which makes Firefly not proc. I noticed that on Fatebringer some, but I still love my Time Lost Fatebringer with Explosive Payload and Firefly, so that's another really interesting role to look at. It does also roll Demolitionist, which I know I've said I really love. Honestly, in this case though, with the Hand Cannon, I don't think I'm personally going to be looking for Demolitionist here. I think Explosive and Incandescent, or Explosive and Firefly, is definitely the choices I would look for on this Hand Cannon. Next we have Midha's Reckoning. This fusion rifle has third column perks of Hipfire Grip, Cornered, Field Prep, Well-Rounded, Backup Plan, Pugilist, and Unrelenting. Here, the third column perks honestly aren't super great in my opinion. I'm not like super excited about any of these third column perks. I could see Unrelenting being kind of useful, a little bit of extra healing. I could see Field Prep, get a little bit of extra stats and ammo reserves, stats if you're crouching, and just ammo reserves in general. I think Field Prep's not bad. Honestly, most of the rest of these, not super interesting for PvE. I could see, nah, honestly, I think it's either Unrelenting or Field Prep, but you're not like screaming in, you know, like excitement with any of these third column perks in my opinion. Fourth column, a little bit more interesting, and then we'll talk about something huge here. We've got Surrounded, Kickstart, Tap the Trigger, Golden Tricorn, Vorpal Weapon, Successful Warm-Up, and Reservoir Burst. A couple different pretty good perks here. I mean, I could argue Surrounded, I could argue Golden Tricorn, Vorpal, but honestly, one of the best perks in the game, along with Chain Reaction, to me, is Reservoir Burst. I don't think, if you're going to use this in PvE, I don't think there's any other option. I think this is absolutely 110% the only option to go for in 99.9999% of cases. Like, if you're going to use a fusion rifle, you want it to be able to AoE some. Otherwise, just like, if you want damage, like if you would use something like Vorpal, just use like a sniper or use like a grenade launcher. I feel like you'd get more value out of it. Reservoir Burst, really, really good. I love this perk. I use it on plug 1 already for an arc fusion rifle. However, where this is going to really shine, right? We got Reservoir Burst, which this procs anytime your battery is full, aka your magazine is full. Now, if you remember, going back a little bit, our origin trait, when reloading near allies, overflows the magazine. And what's insane about this is anytime you're at a full magazine or above, because, again, Runneth Over can put you above your magazine, you will get Reservoir Burst procs. So, depending on how many shots you get extra with Reservoir Burst and with Runneth Over procced, you could potentially get 2, 3, maybe even 4 shots in a row of Reservoir Burst without having to reload at all. So, this combo of Reservoir Burst and Runneth Over is absolutely insane. Again, I wish there was like something a little bit more interesting in this third column, although I don't really even know what it would be. Because something like autoloading could be really nice with Reservoir Burst, but then that probably wouldn't proc Runneth Over. Something like Demolitionist would be really nice, but again, that probably wouldn't proc Runneth Over, and then that would kind of take away a lot of the interesting parts and the value of what this gun can do. So, again, Reservoir Burst, Runneth Over is just on the weapon. Really all you need is Reservoir Burst, and then honestly, your third column's kind of your choice. I think Unrelenting is kind of interesting for that safety and for that healing when you're getting kills, and you should be getting quite a few kills with the AoE and multiple AoE shots you can get. And again, Field Prep is nice, especially for that inventory size that's going to allow you to make sure your mag is going to be full, because if your mag goes below full and you just don't have enough shots, then you're just not getting Reservoir Burst at all. Next we've got Defiance of Yasmin, the sniper rifle. Honestly, not a super exciting gun here. I think the first 4 guns are all really, really exciting for PvE. I've already kind of looked at this. Not anything super great to write home about on the sniper, but we will go over it. We've got no distractions, osmosis, shoot to loot, lead from gold, firefly, ensemble, and snapshot sights. Honestly here, like, again, there's nothing really like outstanding. I feel like lead from gold is solid. You know, it's gonna help your ammo economy a little bit. I don't really think I'd ever recommend shoot to loot as like a main perk, like having a backup weapon in your inventory to like use shoot to loot in some cases. I feel like shoot to loot would be a really strong origin trait, but like isn't really valuable enough to use as a main perk usually. Like again, I think it's nice to have in your inventory and any sort of non-locked loadouts just in case there's a situation you can like hot swap, but even then you'd prefer it on a primary so that you're not losing ammo when you're switching weapons. So, shoot to loot, not really. Lead from gold, decent. Osmosis is another interesting one, actually. Especially for if you're going to use this in stuff like GMs or match game content. Allows you to have your kinetic actually be doing damage and stuff. But even that, with how good Arbalist is now, like, it's just unlikely that you'd want to throw this in. Maybe like if there's another exotic you really, really, really want to use, and then you'd have Osmosis for this, allow you to break shields, and especially this season with it being anti-barrier sniper rifle, I could see that. I could see some value in that for sure, and at least this is something that's not necessarily an option on too many weapons and too many snipers. It is a possibility on Succession, though, from Deepstone Crypt, which to me is already just a better sniper for PvE than this in probably all cases. That also rolls Reconstruction Vorpal, which is, one of the best rolls in the game. But, maybe Osmosis, maybe Lead from Gold. Other than that, don't see a lot of value here. The final row has Demolitionist, Moving Target, Slick Draw, Firing Line, Opening Shot, Vorpal Weapon, and Focus Fury. Again, there's a couple, like, good sniper-related perks, like stuff like Firing Line, Vorpal, and Focus Fury, all pretty good. But without a a triple tap or a 4th times the charm, or even maybe like an auto-loading, like something damage-related in the 3rd column, I feel like things like Firing Line and Focus Fury are a lot less valuable, personally. You have Runneth Over, which gives you the potential to reload more in the mag, but again, like wouldn't you just want to use Reconstruction Vorpal in most cases for this? I think Reconstruction is going to be more valuable than this. Succession is also just going to hit harder as a 72 RPM versus a 90 RPM. This does have Firing Line and Focus Fury, which are both 20%. I think if you were going to try to use this as a more DPS sniper, I would definitely choose Firing Line, so you're not sitting there waiting for the first half of the mag to proc for Focus Fury. They're both 20% damage buffs, so I think Firing Line is definitely the choice. And maybe you don't have Succession. Maybe again, maybe you really want that 20% versus the 15% of Vorpal on on your succession, it could, you know, it is technically 5% more. I just feel like the value of the third column of reconstruction versus anything here is going to take away from that. However, again, going back to this weapon specifically, I do think Vorpal has some value. Again, 15% damage buff if you're going to use this in something like a GM with Osmosis, or maybe Lead from Gold for ammo economy purposes. I think Vorpal is your choice for sure. Especially, again, like if you're doing not 6-man content, it's harder to get Firing Line to proc. Technically, you do have 3 people total in a GM or a dungeon or something, but you would all have to be next to each other, and that's not as likely in that content. And again, I think Focus Fury is just not as valuable for stuff like that, because I don't think you're going to be constantly shooting the same target for long enough to really get the value there. But Vorpal, as soon as you're hitting a boss or as soon as you're hitting a champion, you're getting 15% bonus damage immediately. So I think Vorpal with, again, maybe Osmosis or Lead from Gold gives at least some potential value in certain edge cases that we don't already have value from other weapons. And finally, we have Qullim's Terminus, the machine gun. This was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, machine guns in D1. Definitely a really, really fun one, a really, really strong one. For the third column here, we have Ensemble, Unrelenting, Slick Draw, Firmly Planted, Heating Up, Stats for All, and Dynamic Sway Reduction. Honestly, I'm not super huge on any of these third column perks. I would have really liked to see Demolitionist personally as one of these third column perks. I feel like that's a really solid option, especially on kind of a hard-hitting machine gun. We do have Stats for All. Get some perks or get some stats kind of, you know, across the board. With a machine gun especially, you're probably going to very easily hit 3 targets kind of back-to-back quickly. We have Unrelenting, you know, if you're killing some weaker enemies to get your health back, or if, you know, if you're hitting hard enough to get those tankier enemies, obviously you do get more value from Unrelenting if you're killing tankier enemies quicker, but at the same time, they're also harder to kill. So, you know, you get some value there with healing, but honestly, outside of Unrelenting and outside of Stats for All, not seeing a ton of value here. Dynamic Sway is nice, might make the gun feel a little bit better, but not necessarily giving you any, like, direct benefits, per se. And so, you know, that's an option as well, but honestly, not huge on any of these third column perks. And finally, in the fourth column, we have Wellspring, Eye of the Storm, Firefly, Headstone, Focus Fury, Firing Line, and Killing Tally. So, a couple interesting perks here. I'm going to start with the bottom here, Firing Line and Killing Tally. Obviously, Firing Line just gives you that 20% damage, but it's not like a machine gun is going to be very good for, like, pure DPS, and I don't see a lot of cases where you're just going to kind of, like, sit next to a couple teammates and just, like, go to town with damage on something and really get a ton of value from 20% damage. So it's an option, but honestly not the best option in my opinion. Next we've got Killing Tally, which is going to increase your damage every time you get a kill until you either switch weapons or reload this weapon. Honestly, with Runneth over, you know, you can get a pretty big mag, so, you know, maybe you can get those 3 kills up, get that 30% damage buff going, and then, you know, have it for a while. If you got the big mag with Runneth over, maybe you run like backup mag, maybe you get like an extended mag going in there and a appended mag going in there. Just try to get your mag as big as possible, and then go with Killing Tally and just start like wrecking up the kills. But again, at the same time, like kind of similar to Firing Line, like just a pure damage number on a machine gun. Like maybe if there's a situation where there's a ton of ads and, you know, there's some weak ads and there's a couple tankier ads in there, I could see that being very strong. But honestly, it's questionable. Like it definitely requires a very specific situation and a very specific kind of fully crafted weapon, in my opinion. I think you would need to really focus on getting a big mag, but focus on making sure that you're gonna proc Runneth over, hopefully at least, you know, a couple times over. Again, I feel like this is better in like a 3-man content with like a dungeon or maybe like a GM situation or like a, you know, some sort of Nightfall Strike situation, which then it's just you're not going to get as big of a proc on Runneth over because you have less teammates. But I can see it. I can definitely see it. It's just I think there's a couple other options here that are going to be a little bit more consistent or a little bit more interesting than Killing Tally. But in the right situation, I could definitely see it. The 2 options that are interesting to me are both Firefly and Headstone. They kind of do similar things in terms of allowing for your machine gun to be a little bit more AoE ad clear on top of, you know, its ability to just kill things in general. They do both require precision final blows, so be aware of that. However, this is a slower firing machine gun, so that's going to make it a lot easier to hit your precision shots. It's going to hit harder per bullet, so that's helpful. Honestly, what I would love to see, and I have no idea if this would work at all, but if this could have rolled Firefly and Headstone, like if one of them was in the third column, that would be nuts. Like, that'd be super funny. I don't know how that would even work. Like, it would pop up an icicle and then like immediately blow it up with Firefly or something, but that'd just be kind of funny. But I think either one. Firefly does give you that benefit to reload speed as well when you're getting the kills. Headstone, gives you more of a stasis specific build, and you can get some of those like stasis crystals and stuff like that. But I think both of these are very interesting. Again, I think Killing Tally works in the right situation with the right kind of fully kitted out weapon and build. Outside of that, I'm not seeing too much, but I think it's a solid weapon. Machine guns I think are just a very specific use case weapon at the moment as is anyway, so I think this can fill some good roles when you're going to want to use it. That's all for my guide to the best King's Fall weapon rolls. And also don't forget that the Master version will be coming out later, and we're going to be able to put Adept mods on those weapons as well, so maybe don't spend all your spoils or get too crazy trying to get the weapons right now. You're going to potentially get some better versions in the Adepts and the crafted versions. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.